Most people who know English freeze the instant a real conversation moves faster than they expect. Not because they lack grammar, not because they lack words, because their brain has never practiced reacting instantly. And today, in the next 14,000 words, that changes permanently. I'm Emma, and this is Natural Word English, where we don't collect vocabulary lists, we build reflexes. Here's the actual problem with the way most people study advanced vocabulary. They memorize a word in isolation. The word sits in a drawer somewhere in their memory. And when a real person says something unexpected to them in real time, that drawer stays shut because the brain never practiced pulling the word out under pressure. Context is what opens the drawer automatically. So every word you hear in the next hour is going to arrive wrapped inside a situation, a feeling, a real exchange between two people, so that the next time life hands you that same situation, the word is already loaded and ready. The way, hello, is already loaded and ready. That's the whole method. Now, let's put it to work immediately, because reflexes are exactly what today's theme is built around. The words native speakers reach for when a conversation suddenly speeds up, catches them off guard, or demands an answer they didn't prepare. Picture this. You're at a dinner with colleagues. Someone asks you a question you were not expecting at all, and for half a second your mind goes blank. What a native speaker does in that half second is not panic. It's what we call reacting instinctively. Instinctively means doing something automatically. Without stopping to think it through first, the way you pull your hand back from something hot before you even register the pain. The basic word most learners already know is naturally, but instinctively is sharper. It specifically means your body or mind acted before conscious thought caught up. Listen to how it lands in a real sentence. She instinctively reached out to steady the glass before it even started to fall. Notice the connected speech there. Reached out to softens into something close to. Reach ada. Native speakers never separate those words cleanly. They blend, and that blending is exactly what makes fast native speech feel like a wall of sound to learners who only ever practiced words in isolation. Let's put instinctively into a small scene. Imagine two coworkers, Mia and Daniel, standing in a hallway right after a meeting that didn't go the way anyone expected. Maya, did you see how fast you answered when they asked about the budget cut? Daniel, honestly, I didn't even think. I just instinctively said what felt true in the moment. Mia, that's exactly what I want to be able to do. Right now, I plan every sentence 3 times before I say it. Daniel, it comes with repetition. The more situations you've already lived through, the less your brain has to search for the right words. Here's something a lot of learners never get told directly. We keyed. That feeling Mia described, planning every sentence 3 times, has a name too, and native speakers describe the opposite of it constantly. When someone can respond without that internal rehearsal, they say the person is quick-witted. Quick-witted describes someone who thinks and responds fast, cleverly, often with a bit of humor mixed in. The basic version learners usually know is smart, but quick-witted is specifically about speed of thought. In the moment, not general intelligence over time. My uncle is quick-witted. He always has a comeback ready before anyone else in the room even processes the joke. Now here's a phrase that belongs right next to it, because reflexes aren't only about speaking, they're also about staying steady when something unexpected happens to you. When a plan falls apart and someone doesn't get upset about it, English speakers say, that person took it in stride. Take something in stride means to accept a difficulty or a surprise calmly as a normal part of life without letting it throw you off balance. The flight got canceled and rebooked twice, and she just took it in stride, rearranging her whole week without a single complaint. I want you to notice something about that sentence pattern. She just took it in stride, because that small word, just, appears constantly in advanced natural English to mean simply or without hesitation. And most intermediate learners skip it entirely, which is one of the biggest reasons. Intermediate English still sounds intermediate. Advanced English isn't only bigger words, it's smaller, connective words used with confidence. Let's slow down for a second and really listen to how stride sounds inside a full breath of speech, because this is where shadowing becomes essential. Not just useful, essential. Shadowing means listening to a phrase and repeating it back immediately, almost like an echo, while the sound is still alive in your ear, not after you've had time to think about spelling or grammar. It's different from simply repeating after me, because repeating after me gives your brain time to translate first. Shadowing removes that gap on purpose. So right now, listen once, and the very half second the sound ends, say it out loud. Don't wait. Don't plan it. Just echo it. She just took it in stride. Say it now, immediately, like an echo, not a translation. Good. That immediate reflex you just practiced physically, saying something the instant you hear it, is the exact same reflex you need for real conversation. Because in real conversation, nobody gives you 3 seconds to translate in your head. Let's move to what happens when things go the other way. When someone does lose their composure. There's a beautiful word for this, rattled. To be rattled means to become nervous, shaken, or unable to think clearly because something surprised or upset you. The interviewer asked a question about the gap in my resume, and I'll admit it. I got a little rattled. I stumbled over my words for a second before recovering. Notice that word, recovering, sitting right next to rattled, because the two almost always travel together in real speech, being rattled and then recovering. That's the natural arc of an honest conversation. Nobody who sounds fluent claims they're never nervous, They just describe how quickly they come back from it. And that leads us straight into the opposite state, composed. Composed means calm, controlled, and in charge of your emotions, especially in a stressful moment. Even when the numbers on the screen were clearly wrong, she stayed completely composed and just asked for 5 minutes to fix it. Here's your first role play moment, and I want you to actually imagine yourself inside it, not just listen from the outside. Picture this. You're sitting across from an interviewer. The room is quiet except for the hum of the air conditioner. There's a glass of water in front of you that you haven't touched, and the interviewer just leaned back in their chair and asked you a question you were not expecting at all. Interviewer: tell me about a time you completely failed at something important. Now, before I give you my answer, I want you to pause the video right here for 5 seconds and actually say your own answer out loud, using either instinctively, took it in stride, rattled, or composed. Go ahead, pause now. Welcome back. Here's how a composed, quick-witted answer might sound. Honestly, there was a project last year that fell apart 2 days before the deadline. And in the moment, I definitely felt rattled. My stomach dropped, but I instinctively pulled the team into a room. And instead of panicking, we took the setback in stride and rebuilt the timeline from scratch within a few hours. Notice how one small story used four separate advanced words naturally, back to back, without ever sounding like a vocabulary list. That's the actual goal. Words disappearing into real communication instead of standing out as vocabulary. Let's celebrate that for 1 second, because if you said your own version out loud a moment ago, even a rough one, you just did something most English learners never do. You produced advanced vocabulary under a small amount of simulated pressure instead of only recognizing it while reading. That's the entire difference between knowing a word and owning it. Now let's shift into a slightly different corner of reflexes, the social kind, because reacting fast isn't only about your own composure. It's also about reading other people accurately and instantly. There's a phrase for this that native speakers use constantly and almost no textbook teaches properly. Read the room. To read the room means to quickly sense the mood, atmosphere, or unspoken feelings of the people around you and adjust what you say based on that. He walked in cracking jokes, completely failed to read the room, and didn't notice everyone was still upset about the layoffs. Listen to the rhythm of that phrase. Again, read the room. And notice how in fast, natural speech, the D at the end of read almost disappears into the T sound. It comes out closer to re-throom. Native speakers are not being lazy. This is simply how English sounds link together when spoken at natural speed, and training your ear to expect that blending is just as important as learning the word itself. The skill of reading the room closely connects to another expression. Pick up on. To pick up on something means to notice a small signal, hint, or detail that isn't stated directly, often an emotional one. I could tell something was wrong the moment I picked up on the tension in her voice. Even though her words sounded completely normal, here's a mini dialogue between two friends, Sophia and Jordan. Right after a group dinner that felt a little off. Sophia, did you pick up on how quiet Ben got when we mentioned the promotion? Jordan, I did, actually, but I wasn't sure if I was reading too much into it. Sophia, no, I felt it too. Something's clearly bothering him. Jordan, should one of us just ask him directly? Or would that make it worse? Sophia, I think a direct question might actually help. Sometimes people want to be asked. Jordan, all right, I'll text him later tonight, gently, not like an interrogation. Now let's switch roles. And this time, you're Jordan. I'll read Sophia's lines, and after each one, I want you to pause and answer as Jordan, in your own words, using today's vocabulary if you can. Ready? Sophia, did you notice how tense the meeting felt today? Pause here and answer as Jordan now, out loud in your own words, Sophia. Honestly, I think we should say something before it gets worse. Pause again and give your own response as Jordan. Good work engaging with that hesitation you might have felt trying to form your own sentence is exactly the muscle we are training. And it gets smaller every single time you practice it. I promise you that. Let's add 2 more words to the reading people family because they sharpen this whole idea even further. Tactless describes someone who says things without considering other people's feelings, often causing unintended offense. He's brilliant at his job, but he can be shockingly tactless. He once told a grieving coworker to just focus on productivity. The opposite quality, someone who handles sensitive situations carefully and kindly, is diplomatic. She has this incredible diplomatic way of disagreeing with someone without ever making them feel attacked. Notice the basic words hiding underneath both of these: tactless upgrades, rude, and diplomatic upgrades, nice or polite. But neither basic word carries the same precision. Rude doesn't specifically mean insensitive to feelings, and nice doesn't specifically mean skillful at navigating conflict. That precision is the entire value of moving from B1 vocabulary into true C1 and C2 vocabulary. You're not just sounding fancier, you're saying something more exact than the basic word ever could. Let's slow our pace down here. For just a moment, take a breath with me. In through the nose, out slowly, because we've covered a lot of ground already, and your brain deserves 5 seconds to let it settle before we speed back up. Good. Now, one more concept before we close this first block. Gauge someone's reaction. To gauge someone's reaction means to carefully watch or test how a person feels about something, usually before deciding what to say or do next. I mentioned the idea casually first, just to gauge her reaction, before committing to the full proposal. Here's a short self-practice exercise. I want you to actually do right now, out loud, alone, using your senses, because turning these words into automatic reflexes means using them outside of a scripted dialogue too. Look around wherever you are right now and describe it using at least one of today's words. For example, you might say, I can instinctively tell the room feels calm right now, or if I read the room, everyone around me seems focused. Pause the video and try your own version out loud right now, using your real surroundings. That's the real training. Taking a word out of my sentence and putting it inside your actual life, because your brain doesn't build fluency from listening alone. It builds fluency from producing language under slightly real conditions, even small ones like describing the room you're sitting in. We're just getting started. There's an entire second layer of reflex vocabulary coming next. The words for staying unshakable under real pressure. And a full role play built around a moment where everything goes wrong in real time. So keep that same energy, because the next block is where this really speeds up. Right? Let's speed up. There's a small cluster of words that all orbit around one idea, staying steady when everything around you is falling apart. And native speakers switch between them constantly, depending on exactly how much pressure is involved. Start with unfazed. To be unfazed means to remain completely unaffected or undisturbed by something that would normally upset or shock most people. The printer jammed, the client walked in early, and the Wi-Fi died, all within 10 minutes, and somehow she stayed completely unfazed through the entire thing. Notice how unfazed almost always shows up with that word completely. Right in front of it in natural speech, native speakers rarely say someone is just unfazed. They intensify it. Completely unfazed, totally unfazed, because the word itself already implies something dramatic just happened. And the intensifier matches that drama. Now listen to the connected speech pattern hiding inside that sentence in. Again, stayed completely unfazed, said at natural speed, blends into something close to stayed completely unfazed. The middle syllables compress. The ending consonants barely get their own space. And this is precisely the kind of native rhythm that textbook audio almost never trains you for, because textbook audio is recorded slowly and clearly on purpose. Real conversation isn't slow and clear, and your ear has to build tolerance for that compression, not just recognition of the individual words. Right next to unfazed sits a phrase you'll hear constantly in workplaces and emergencies alike. Keep your cool. To keep your cool means to stay calm and in control of your emotions during a stressful or provocative situation. Somebody spilled coffee directly onto his laptop 30 seconds before his presentation, And he actually kept his cool, wiped it off, and started right on time. The opposite of keeping your cool is to get flustered, or sometimes just fluster, meaning to become confused, nervous, or embarrassed. Usually because something happened faster than you could process it. The unexpected question from the audience clearly flustered him. He kept starting sentences and abandoning them halfway through. Let's build a full scene around this, because this is exactly the kind of moment where these words earn their place. Picture this. You're in a small conference room. The projector just froze mid-presentation. 15 people are staring at a blank screen, and the client in the front row just checked his watch for the second time. Presenter, a woman named Priya. I am so sorry about this. Give me just 1 second. Colleague, leaning over quietly. You okay? You look a little flustered. Priya, a little? Yeah, but I'm not going to let a projector ruin 6 weeks of work. Colleague, just talk through it without slides for a minute. You clearly know this cold. Priya, you're right. Actually, that might even land better, more direct. Colleague, exactly. And honestly, staying this composed under pressure is going to impress them more than perfect slides would have. Now here's your turn to switch roles again. I'll be Priya, and you respond as the colleague. Live, out loud, using either flustered, keep your cool, or unfazed somewhere in your answer. Priya, everything just froze. I genuinely don't know what to do right now. Pause the video here and give your own response as the colleague. Out loud, right now. Good. However you answered, whether it was smooth or a little clumsy, you just did the exact thing that builds real-time fluency. You produced language on demand, under a small manufactured pressure, instead of only recognizing vocabulary passively while listening. That gap between recognize, gain, and producing is the entire gap between an intermediate learner and an advanced one, and you just closed a tiny piece of it. 2 more words belong in this same family before we move forward. Poise is a noun, meaning graceful, calm confidence, especially the kind that's visible in how someone carries themselves under attention or pressure. She answered every hostile question from the board with such poise that by the end, half the room was nodding along with her. And the strongest word in this entire cluster, unshakable, meaning so calm, confident, or firmly held that nothing can disturb or change it. His belief in the project stayed unshakable. Even after 3 investors said no in the same week. Notice the shape of unshakable itself for a second, because noticing word construction is its own advanced skill. Shake plus able plus the negative prefix one, something that cannot be shaken. Once you start noticing that pattern, you'll start recognizing dozens of other C1 words built the exact same way. Unbreakable, unmistakable, unforgettable. And instead of memorizing each one separately, you start predicting. Meaning from structure, which is a massive shortcut. advanced learners use constantly, and beginners rarely even realize exists. Let's do a short listening for gist moment here, because reflexes in real conversation aren't only about speaking fast, they're also about understanding fast, even when you don't catch every single word. I'm going to say a sentence at natural native speed, a little faster than everything else in this video so far, and I don't want you to try to catch every word. I want you to catch the feeling and the general idea only. Listen, honestly, by the time the client finally showed up an hour late complaining about traffic, she just smiled, kept her cool, and acted like nothing had happened at all, which honestly impressed everyone in that room way more than an apology would have. Did you catch every single word? Probably not, and that's completely fine. That was the point. What was the general feeling of that sentence? If your answer was something close to, a client was late, someone stayed calm anyway, and people respected that, you got exactly what you needed. In real conversations, native speakers say things at that exact speed constantly. And the difference between someone who freezes and someone who follows along, naturally, is not vocabulary size. It's the confidence to let a few words pass by unclaimed and just grab the overall meaning. When you don't catch everything someone says, the natural, fluent response isn't panic. It's a small phrase like, "Sorry, I caught most of that." Or a simple, right, that makes sense, said with quiet confidence even when you missed a detail. Native speakers do this constantly with each other too. This isn't a learner weakness, it's just how real listening works. Let's celebrate that for a second, because listening for gist instead of word-by-word translation is genuinely one of the hardest habits to build. And if you followed along with that fast sentence and grabbed even the general shape of it, that's real progress. Not small progress, real progress. Now, let's move into a new corner of reflex vocabulary. The words for handling conflict and tension the moment it appears, because a huge part of sounding naturally advanced in English is not avoiding disagreement. It's handling it smoothly the instant it shows up. When a conversation is getting tense and someone successfully calms it down before it turns into a real argument, English speakers say they diffused the tension. To diffuse tension literally comes from diffusing a bomb, removing the danger before it explodes, and in conversation, it means the same thing emotionally. The two of them were clearly about to argue over the schedule again, but Marcus diffused the tension with one well-timed joke, and the whole room relaxed. Right next to that sits a phrase for a slightly different skill when someone notices an argument forming and steps in before it even fully starts. That's called nipping something in the bud. Nip something in the bud means to stop a problem while it's still small, before it has a chance to grow into something bigger. The manager noticed two team members getting snippy in the group chat, and nipped it in the bud with a quick private message to both of them. Here's a role play scenario built entirely around this idea, and I want you to really picture yourself here, not just listen passively. Imagine you're in a team meeting. Two colleagues, Alex and Priya, from earlier, are starting to disagree loudly about whose fault a missed deadline actually is. And the tension in the room is rising fast. You can feel it. That specific kind of silence where everyone else has stopped typing and started listening. Alex, sharper than usual. I sent that file 3 days ago. This isn't on me. Priya, defensive. I never got it. And even if you did send it, you never confirmed I received it. Alex, that's not really my responsibility though, is it? Priya, okay, this is getting a little unnecessary. Now pause the video here, and you're the third person in this meeting. Say out loud. Right now, one sentence you would say to diffuse the tension or nip this in the bud using today's vocabulary, if you can. Whatever you said, notice something important about what just happened. You weren't asked to translate a sentence from your own language. You were asked to generate an original thought in English. Live. Under a tiny bit of simulated social pressure, and that is precisely the skill real conversations demand every single day. Generating original thought on the spot, not translating prepared thoughts from memory. Let's add one final piece to this section, a phrase for what happens after tension gets diffused successfully, when things go back to feeling normal and comfortable. English speakers say, the mood lightened, or things lightened up. After Marcus's joke, the whole mood in the room instantly lightened, and within a minute, everyone was laughing about something completely unrelated. Take a breath with me again. For just a moment, we've built a genuinely powerful cluster of vocabulary already, staying unfazed, keeping your cool, diffusing tension, nipping problems in the bud, reading the room, picking up on signals, and reacting instinctively, instead of freezing. And every single one of these was delivered inside a real breathing situation, not a flashcard. That's not an accident. That's the entire architecture of how this channel builds vocabulary that actually survives contact with a real conversation that's instead of disappearing the moment the video ends. There's still a substantial amount of ground ahead of us. A full block on expressing opinions quickly and diplomatically under pressure. More phonetics. Work on rising and falling intonation in fast disagreement. Another full role play, the self-practice sensory exercise, using this new vocabulary, and the closing fluency round that ties every single word from this entire video together into one continuous flow. Keep that energy up, because the next section moves even faster than this one did. Let's keep the momentum going straight into how fluent speakers share opinions instantly, without softening everything into mush or sounding harsh by accident, because that balance is one of the trickiest reflexes in the entire language when someone states an opinion clearly and without hesitation. Even if it's unpopular, English speakers say they spoke their mind. To speak your mind means to express your honest opinion openly, even when it might be uncomfortable or go against what others think. Everyone else stayed quiet during the meeting, but she spoke her mind and said the whole plan needed to be reconsidered. Right beside it sits a phrase for doing this with real courage. When someone shares an unpopular truth despite obvious risk, they didn't hold back. Hold back means to stop yourself from saying or doing something, usually out of caution or politeness, and not holding back means removing that hesitation completely. He usually stays diplomatic in meetings, but this time he didn't hold back. He told the client directly that the timeline was unrealistic. Here's where the phonetics work gets genuinely important, because disagreeing in English isn't just about which words you choose. It's about intonation, the rise and fall of your voice. And a small mistake in intonation can accidentally make a polite disagreement sound like an attack. Listen to this sentence twice. First, a flat, falling intonation, almost like a statement of fact, with no softness at all. I don't think that's going to work. Now listen to the same words with a slight rise near think, and a gentler fall at the end. The version native speakers actually use when disagreeing kindly in a professional setting. I don't think that's going to work. Hear the difference? The second version invites the other person into a conversation. The first version can sound like the conversation is already over. This single shift in intonation is something almost no textbook ever teaches directly, and it's exactly the kind of invisible skill that separates someone who sounds naturally fluent from someone who sounds technically correct but slightly cold. Let's practice that shadowing reflex again right now, immediately. I don't think that's going to work. The instant that sound finishes, say it out loud with the same gentle rise and fall. Don't plan it. Don't translate it. Just echo the melody along with the words. Now here's a word for someone who's especially good at this exact balance. Saying real, sometimes difficult things while still keeping the conversation warm. Tactful. Tactful is the positive cousin of that word. Tactless from earlier, and it means having the skill to say sensitive or difficult things in a way that doesn't hurt or offend anyone. She was incredibly tactful about the feedback. She mentioned what wasn't working, but she framed it as an opportunity rather than a failure. Let's build a longer conversation here, because opinions in real life almost never happen in a single sentence. They build across several turns, with each person adjust slightly based on what the other person just said. Be as, and I want you to actually feel that back and forth. Picture this. Two friends, Noah and Grace, are sitting at a kitchen table. There's a half-finished business plan spread out between them, and Grace just finished reading the last page in complete silence, the kind of silence that makes Noah nervous before she even says a word. Grace, Okay, I read the whole thing, and I want to be honest with you. Noah, please, go ahead. I'd rather hear it now than after we've spent the money. Grace, I think the marketing section is genuinely strong, but the financial projections feel a little optimistic to me. Noah, optimistic how? Specifically? Grace, you're assuming a 30% growth rate in year one. And, honestly, from everything I've seen, that's rare even for established companies. Noah, I hear you. I think I got a little caught up in the excitement of the idea. Grace, that's completely understandable. And for what it's worth, I still believe in the core concept. I just think the numbers need another pass. Notice how Grace never once used a harsh word, and yet she spoke her mind completely. She didn't hold back the truth, but she stayed tactful the entire way through. That combination, honesty plus warmth, is exactly what advanced English speakers aim for in real disagreement, and it's built from vocabulary choices exactly like the ones we just practiced. Now switch roles with me one more time. I'll read Grace's lines, and you respond as Noah, live, out loud, using today's vocabulary wherever it fits naturally. Grace, honestly, I think we should cut the timeline in half. 6 months feels far too ambitious. Pause the video right here and respond as Noah, out loud, in your own words right now. Whatever you said, notice that you weren't just repeating a script. You were negotiating a disagreement in real time, in English. And that reflex, responding to pushback without freezing, is precisely what most learners never get the chance to practice. Most not acid, because most study methods only ever ask you to agree with a scripted line, never to defend or adjust a position on the spot. Let's add one more useful pair here. Before we move toward the ending stretch of this video, when someone changes their opinion after hearing a good argument without being stubborn about it, English speakers say they came around. Not. Come around means to eventually accept or agree with an idea you were originally against, usually after more information or persuasion. I was skeptical about switching software at first, but after seeing the demo, I completely came around to the idea. And the opposite, someone who refuses to change their mind no matter what evidence appears, is described as stubborn, or, more precisely and more advanced, set in their ways. Set in their ways describes someone, often but not always older, who has fixed habits or opinions and strongly resists changing them. My grandfather is wonderfully set in their ways about certain things. He still writes checks instead of using a banking app. Let's do our self-practice, sensory exercise now, and I want you to genuinely do this out loud, not just listen and nod along in your head, because that difference between passive listening and active production is the entire engine behind fluency. Look around wherever you are right now and describe your surroundings using at least one word from this entire video. You might say something like, honestly, the room feels calm right now, or If I had to speak my mind about this space, I'd say it's a little too cluttered for me to concentrate. Or even, right now, nothing here is unfazing me. Everything feels completely normal. Pause the video and try your own version out loud using your real environment around you. Right now, that right there is the exact moment a word stops being something you learned and starts being something you own. Because you didn't just repeat my sentence, you built your own sentence about your own real life using a word that 30 minutes ago might have been unfamiliar to you. We're heading into the final stretch. The final stretch now. Uke. So let's move into the fluency round. And I want your energy to rise with me here. Because this next part moves fast on purpose. No long explanations, no slowing down, just pure recall and repetition, the way real conversation actually demands. Ready? Here we go. Rapid fire. Say each of these out loud. The instant you hear it, don't think, just echo. Instinctively. Quick-witted. Took it in stride. Rattled. Composed. Read the room. Picked up on. Tactless. Diplomatic. Gauge someone's reaction. Unfazed. Keep your cool. Flustered. Pause. Unshakable. Diffuse the tension. Nip it in the bud. Lightened up. Speak your mind. Hold back. Tactful. Come around. Set in their ways. That's 22 words and phrases, all delivered inside real scenes, real dialogues, and real emotional situations. Not one single flashcard in the entire video, and if you shadowed even half of those out just now, your mouth and your brain just rehearsed reflexive, real-time English production 22. Separate times in under a minute. Here's your actual challenge. And I want this to be specific, not a vague like and subscribe. Before you close this video, write one sentence in the comments using any word from today describing something that actually happened to you this week. It's not a random example sentence, a true one from your real life. If someone stayed unfazed while you were falling apart, tell me. If you finally spoke your mind about something you'd been holding back on, tell me that too. I read every single one. And honestly, the moment learners start using these words to talk about their own real lives, instead of my examples, is the exact moment. Fluency stops being a study goal and starts being a habit. If today's practice pushed your English forward, even a little, make sure you're subscribed to Natural Word English, because we build a brand new set of real, usable, context-driven vocabulary every single time. Never isolated word lists. Always real conversations, real pressure, real reflexes. Share this with someone who freezes in real conversations the same way you used to, because reflexes, real ones, are built through repetition, not through reading one list one time and hoping it sticks. Come back tomorrow and notice something. This vocabulary is going to feel just a little more automatic than it did today. That's not motivation talk. That's simply how the brain wires new language, repetition, compresses hesitation. Every single time you use these words, the gap between thinking and speaking gets smaller until one day it disappears completely. And that's not a distant goal. That's exactly what's already starting to happen right now.